Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about gamifying English language teaching in non-digital contexts. And why non-digital context? Of course, not every classroom around the world is equipped with necessary technology that we can do digital gamification. So it's important that we can apply the gameplay theories into non-digital contexts as well. So here's the content of the session. First, I'll walk you through some of the research on how we can include gamefulness into language learning courses. Then I'll dive deeper into what gamification of learning is, followed by an example of how I made my non-digital gamified literacy program. Finally, I'll give you some tips how you can gamify your instruction by using game elements to make language learning gameful for your learners. So let's begin. The first is research on gamefulness. Gamefulness is basically a framework to use games or game-like elements in language teaching. There are three ways we can include gamefulness in our language courses. The first one is game-enhanced language learning, the second, game-based language learning, and third, game-informed language learning. Let's take a look at each one of them. So game-enhanced language learning is the use of games that are not designed for language learning. I'm sure you must have played games in your language classroom, which you usually enjoy outside the classroom. For example, Scrabble, that's a game that is not designed for language learning, yet it has the potential to be used in language learning classroom and help language learning learners. So if we are using these kind of games that are not designed for language learning in our language classes, then we are enhancing our language learning experiences for our students by game-enhanced language learning. Some of the other examples of such games is Hangman. So Hangman is not designed for learning, but we can use it in our classrooms because it helps students to recycle vocabulary, for example. Similarly, Treasure Hunt and World of Warcraft, guessing games, these are some of the examples of games which are not designed for language learning, yet they have the potential to be used in language classrooms. And if we use such games, then we are including gamefulness in our language courses by game-enhanced language learning. The second is game-based language learning, which is the use of games that are intentionally designed for language learning. So the pedagogy is structured into the game. For example, board games. I'll show you an example of a board game. This is a board game which is designed for language learning. This is like a Ludo. Students play it with the dice and counters. Two or more players can play it together. They start from the beginning here, and then they roll the dice one by one, and whatever the number comes, they just move their counter accordingly, answering this question every time: which one would the world be better without, and why? So they have to finish it. There's some kind of competition between players. They have to finish it as quickly as possible. And there are some areas where if they come to those places, they have to go back 5 spaces. So yeah, so that's a kind of a game which is not for only for fun, but that's designed for language learning. So if we are using board games that are designed for language learning, we are using word games, flashcard games. Space Team is another example, which has been designed by some researchers in Concordia University. That's designed for language learners, English language learners. So yeah, if you are using these type of games that are designed for language learning, in which pedagogy is important, the pedagogy has been taken into consideration when designing the game. So these are the games which, if we use them, we are including gamefulness in our language courses through the use of these type of games. Duolingo is another classic example for game-based language learning. Okay, finally, We have game informed language learning, which is to use the principles of game to inform our instruction, which is to look at how games are designed and using those techniques, strategies, mechanics to design our language courses. This is how we are informing our language instruction through games, and that comes under the umbrella of game informed language learning. It is also referred to as gamification. Some of the examples are a reward system, points accrual system, levels, competition, or some kind of collaboration, which we have experienced in all types of games that we play. And if we are including these strategies, these techniques, these mechanics in our language courses, then we are informing our language courses by game informed language learning. Let's dive deeper into what gamification is. So, gamification is the use of game design elements in non game contexts. These non game contexts could be education, banking, healthcare, or any other sectors, which is not a game environment. So, you must have seen some banking applications, especially e wallets, which offer you some kind of points if you use their services. So, this is how they are gamifying their mobile applications to engage their customers. They want customers to use this in because they are getting rewards. Gamification is usually a set of activities rather than a single one-off activity, and that's important. There are many frameworks of gamification because it's used widely in different industries, not only in education. So, but a simple, easy to use framework of use is of dynamics and mechanics. So, if we understand what mechanics are, what dynamics are, we can gamify our instruction, or we can at least see and evaluate a gamified program. Mechanics are elements such as points or rewards to provide users with gameful experiences, and dynamics are experiences or behaviors that users or gamers experience or demonstrate while interacting with game mechanics. So while we want to include gamefulness in our courses, or we want to gamify our courses, we can think about the dynamics which we want students to experience, such as, let's say, competition, and then we can work backwards to think about what are the mechanics that could be helpful in eliciting those kind of dynamics. Some common mechanics have been categorized by Kim and colleagues, such as rewards, reward schedules, avoidance, leaderboard, status, and quest. I'll just give you an overall idea what they are. So, of course, when we are using rewards mechanics, we can think about the points, levels, progression, some kind of a badge, a virtual currency, some kind of currency or points which they can use at the end of the course to buy something, and things like that. And when we are thinking about rewards, we need to think about what kind of schedule that we are going to use for giving reward. It could be a fixed time schedule or a variable time schedule. So, for example, in fixed time schedule, we can set this condition that if you do a particular thing for 1 week, you get this reward. In variable, you can say that if you do if you achieve 10 things, then you can get a reward. You can do it in 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month. When we are thinking about rewards, we can also tie it to a ratio. So it could be a fixed ratio reward schedule or a variable ratio reward schedule. For example, we can ask the students to do 10 tasks in order to get this reward. So whenever they complete 10 tasks, they get a reward. 10 tasks, they get a reward. That's fixed ratio. But we can also have this variable ratio where we can ask the students that in level 1, if you complete 10 tasks, you get a reward. In level 2, you complete 12 tasks, then you get a reward. And it could become more and more difficult as they go. So There could be avoidance mechanics, which we can use to discourage students to do something. You must have experienced those kind of games in which you have to kill all the monsters instead, except for the black monster. So wherever you see a black monster, you don't shoot at it, otherwise you die, because that is very powerful, for example. So it's the avoidance mechanic that we can also include to avoid some kind of laziness or and things like that. We can also have this leaderboard mechanic where we can publish students progress compared to each other. It could be macro, when every player's progress is together on one chart. It could be micro, where the progress is level wise, right? It could be indirect competition or direct competition, which means if it's indirect, so players progress is not affecting other players' progress. But in direct competition, if someone is going up, the other person is going down as well. And similarly, we could have some status mechanic where we can give some kind of a badge to student to wear if they reach top levels, and something related to that. We could have quests. You must have experienced those kind of games in which you cannot unlock the game that the unlock the levels before you complete certain levels. So you cannot unlock level 3 and 4 until you complete levels 1 and 2, and something like that. We could also have that lottery system where students get rewards by chance, and could be communal discovery where everyone is on a discovery together. And we can also have this scaffolding where they get some kind of hints to complete their tasks. Some common dynamics are challenge, competition, collaboration, control, expression, relaxation, sympathy, thrill, achievement, risk-taking, status, and pride. We can think about these dynamics because these are the experiences which we want to give students, or the behaviors which we want to elicit in students. So we can think about these first, and then we can work backwards to think about what kind of mechanics can help us achieve these. So what are the benefits of gamification? Of course, we don't use gamification because it's fun. No, it should have some educational value. Otherwise, it's of no use for teachers. So the first benefit, and of course foremost, why it was transferred into other industries, is because everyone wants to achieve that kind of engagement which students or players experience while playing games. So they want to capitalize on that engagement and achieve such kind of engagement in non-game contexts. So it of course helps us to engage students and motivate them. And the second, not only this, but also it helps us to improve their learning outcomes, which is important for us because that's the ultimate goal for teachers. It could also help us to have some behavioral changes in students. For example, they don't like an activity, and then we start rewarding them if they do certain tasks. And then once they receive their those rewards, and they do that activity a couple of times, then they start liking it. So research has also shown some benefits in terms of behavioral changes through gamification. Gamification also gives opportunity for languaging and social collaboration. It gives an opportunity to interact with other people and use the language, or to talk about language, which are some useful things for language learning. It, of course, gives opportunity for sheltered practice, which means the students are taking risks. They are confident to participate because they think they are in a low stakes environment. They're in a game, so they tend to practice more. They tend to produce more language without losing their confidence. And of course, all games are goal oriented. And if we are gamifying something, so there's an end goal. Okay, here you have to achieve, here you have to reach, and this is what you are going to achieve. So this helps students. Now, I'll walk you through the gamified literacy project that I designed, and you can, of course, emulate it, change it, use it in your classroom as you want. So the gamified literacy program that I designed is called Literacy Challenge. In short, we would call it LitChall. It was an 18-week program which ran concurrently with the students' mandatory English classes. So students were taking their mandatory classes, and I was running this program in parallel. Materials that were used were from Shell Education's 180 Days of Reading for sixth grade, and I'll show you the material sample in a while. My audience was junior high school students, third graders, aged between 14 and 16. I used this program for Pakistani students, so they were grade 9 students, and in Japan, they are translated as junior high school students, which are in third grade junior high school students. The proficiency levels for my students were ranging from low B1 to B2 on a CEFR scale. This was the structure, the weekly structure. There was a thematic set of 5 worksheets, which I'll show you in a while, per week, which I would give to students on Mondays. And the first day was, do you want Tuesday? Because on day 5 there was a writing prompt which students had to write, so because it's a little bit time consuming, so I wanted the students to to spend the weekend over it, and so that they can produce a well-written text. So from days 1 to 3 there was a reading passage. They had to read one short passage followed by multiple choice questions. On day 4 they had to read a longer passage followed by multiple choice questions, and on day 5 they had to respond to a writing prompt related to the week's theme. This is how I would evaluate and give them feedback. Daily tasks were completed at home. I would only go to their classes for just 5 to 10 minutes before the school day. And usually, for example, if I am going there when day 2 is due, I would collect all day 2 worksheets and then redistribute them so that everyone has other students' worksheet. I would also give them a point scoring sheet. So for example, if a student A has a student C worksheet, I would also give the point scoring sheet of student C to student A, and then I would write down the answers on the board, and the students would check and write it in the point scoring sheet. But for day 5, of course, I would collect all the worksheets, all the written tasks, and then I would go home and mark them using a holistic rubric for checking. Let me show you the materials that I would use. So this is the title of the book, 180 Days of Reading for Sixth Grader, published by Shell Education. This is what I use with my students, and these are the sample materials which I've downloaded from their website. They give you an e-copy which you can distribute it to your students. So you can purchase an e-copy and then use photocopies for your students. This is how weekly units are structured. So there is one theme as well as one genre, as you can see, non-fiction, fiction, or non-traditional text. And these are some of the outcomes which are given. This is how the texts look like. This is unit 1, week 1, and day 1. And students have to read this short text about the world of inventions. So the theme here is inventions, and then they have to respond to these questions, multiple choice questions. Day 2, it's the same short passage on the same theme, followed by some multiple choice questions. On day 3, they have to read another short passage on the same theme, followed by some MCQs. Here in the second edition, they have also given some open-ended questions in day 3. However, I used the first edition, which had no open-ended questions, because open-ended questions requires teacher to mark you. So it's up to you which edition you would like to buy. On day 4, they have to read a slightly longer text. As you can see here, it's about an inventor, the same theme, and they have to respond to these multiple choice questions, followed by day 5, which is a writing prompt on the same theme, and they have to respond to it. These are the score sheets which I use. As you can see, it's week, day. This was an individual student score sheet, and then students would write down the answers here and give them the points here. So each question had 1 point. So from days 1 to 3, they had 5 multiple choice questions which they had to respond to, and it means they could get a maximum of 5 points. So yeah, this is for days 4 and 5. For day 5, I would give them the mark, and for day 4, in first edition, there were 8 multiple choice questions. So yeah, students would do it for me. These are the consolidated sheets which I had to maintain, because once I would collect the students' scoring sheets, individual scoring sheets, I would copy the score here so that I can publish it on a leaderboard, which I would put it outside the classroom so that everyone can see. Of course, you can choose to put it inside or wherever is suitable. These are the consolidated sheet for days 4 and 5, and this is the writing rubric. By the way, these are also given in the materials. So I just adapted it to fit my own needs. So you can either use these. These have been uploaded in the description, or you can use the ones which are given in the materials. Okay, let's move on. Um, so let's have a look at the gamified elements that were included in my gamified literacy project. So of course, there was a points accrual system. Students have to get more and more points. It was a 4-week cycle. After every week, their points would go on the leaderboard. But after the 4 weeks, the accumulated marks would go on the scoreboard, and the top students from each group would get a certificate, and I'll come back to it in a while. So the gamified elements were points accrual system, scoreboard, leaderboard, which was outside the classroom. There were 3 groups, which means there were 3 levels, and they were the names were Sproutling, Seedling, and Budding. And of course, they were the camouflage for below, at, and above average students. So I wanted them to feel the challenge from each other, and that's why I separated them into different groups, so that below average students could compete with one another. They don't have to compete with above average students, which would be unfair, of course. So this is how I made these 3 groups, and there was a reward mechanism. There were certificates, gifts, and photos. um, so there were 2 types of certificates. One was literacy star, and the second was dedicated learner. The literacy, so after 4 weeks, the top scorer from each group would get a literacy star. And there was another certificate, dedicated learner, which was for those students who showed dedication towards the program. So after a 4-week cycle, one student from each group who showed dedication towards the program would get this dedicated learner certificate. And this was very motivating for students, because if they could not make it to the top, they could still get a dedicated learner certificate, just to encourage all the students so that they keep participating. There was pre-negotiated gift, a stationery box filled with chosen items. So just to motivate my students from in the beginning, I just before the start of the program, I told them what kind of gifts they would like to get. And of course, I could not give them the Switch or the video games they would demand, but whatever was possible. So they demanded a stationery box filled with fancy items, which I made sure was available for them. So after the accumulation of 2 certificates, it could be 2 literacy stars or 2 dedicated learner, they could claim their gift, that was the stationery box. So once they've collected two certificates, they could come to me. Okay, these are the 2 certificates. I want my stationery box, and they would get it. Of course, while they were receiving the certificate or a gift, their photos were taken and were shared on school social media, and they were excited about it. And that was part of rewards mechanism, because they would feel excited about it. They would feel that they are top-notch students of the school. Their photos is on the school's social media. They would tag their friends, show their photos to their family members, and they were proud of it. Let's have a gamified view of lit challenge. So game structure, as I mentioned, was a 4 week cycle for rewards. There was point accrual system. There was an inclusion for late submission and kind of avoidance mechanic that I used here, some kind of a penalty. As I mentioned, it's a 4 week cycle. So in the beginning, if some students are not doing anything and they later want to participate, they could submit their work late with a penalty of -1 for each day. So, for example, if they would submit their day one work on day two, then they get their points -1. If they submit it 2 days after, then they would get -2, and so on. That really worked because I wanted to include everyone. Because if there was no mechanism for that, then students, those who couldn't do it for any reason in the beginning, they would just quit. They would not do it, and the 4 week cycle is pretty long. It's 1 month before they can restart, and then they might tune off. There were clear themes. There were thematic units. There was progression from easy to difficult from days 1 to 3. There were easy text. Day 4, a little longer. Day 5, they had to write something. Mechanics were collecting points. There was a leaderboard. There were tasks which they had to complete, rewards. There were different groups. There was feedback in the form of points which they were receiving on their writing task and on their reading answers. The dynamics which I wanted to elicit within them were achievement, competition, challenge, success, engagement. So these were the things that I thought before designing this program. This is what I want to achieve in my students, and then I thought about the mechanics, how I can do it. The interesting thing was I didn't think about interaction, but it really happened. So what happened was students, before submitting their day 5 tasks to me, they were showing it to their friends to take feedback from their friends, improving them, and then submitting it to me so that they could get a full score. So this is how interaction happened, and you never know what kind of dynamics they would come up once the students are interacting with these mechanics in the game. And another mechanic that came out of sudden was peer pressure. They were feeling the peer pressure, and that's why they were participating in the game. I did not think about it, but this happened. These are some of the learners' comments from LitChell. So I stayed awake until 2 a.m. to complete my tasks because I had to win. We can clearly see the sense of competition from this comment. I realized that in my group, the results were upside down with a difference of zero point 0.5 mark. So I enjoyed it because it was a tough competition and I had to work hard. So you can see the challenge and the competition which students felt. Then when the second chart was published, I was like, I wouldn't get a low score in it. I should get a good score in it. Then finally I got a good score. So yeah, you can see that students were motivated because their low scores were also published on the leaderboard. I was able to learn sentence formation, the construction of sentences according to the situation, for example. So of course you can see there's a clear learning outcome which students were achieving. So they picked up some vocabulary from the text and they used it in their writing texts. Yeah, I didn't do it from the beginning. I started a bit late and I also got literacy star. Then I said to myself, let's continue it. And then I started enjoying it. You can see there's a behavioral change and the external rewards were creating some kind of internal motivation. I'd been thinking what I would get if I would participate. I wasn't focusing much on it, but from the second cycle, I felt that those who did well got rewards. So if I do well, I would get rewards as well. So you can see there's a sense of um, competition, extrinsic rewards, extrinsic motivation, which they were getting from the rewards which they were seeing. Okay, other students are getting. I should also work hard to get one. It was difficult to compete within it. This was commented while commenting about the group members. So the grouping did work. Okay, some of the tips that I would like to give you how you can gamify your instruction. First of all, of course, make yourself familiar with learning a language through gamification. Try to use gamified applications such as Duolingo or Space Team or anything whichever is gamified, so that you can develop that sense. Okay, this is how these are the dynamics that I can feel, I can experience because of these game mechanics, so that you can also use them in your classroom. Think about different mechanics and dynamics you would like to include in your instruction, and then you can try to do them. Maybe you can start with one lesson only, but remember, gamification is a set of activities. You can try it on one lesson, but it has to be a series of lessons. The most important thing about gamification is that learners feel the disposition of being in a game. So if students don't think they are playing a game, then it's not a game, no matter how well it's designed. If it's even if it's not well designed game, but they feel, oh, it's a game, we are enjoying it, then it's a game for them. Try to use lit shell with your class. You can use different materials for lower or higher levels of your students. Not all learners will enjoy gamified instruction, so it's good to give students more autonomy. If there are more choices within the game, students might like one or the other. But if there are no choices, no autonomy, maybe some of the students would not play. And of course, when it's a game, there must be a choice. Either they want to play it or they won't. In my case, only one student dropped out. She said she didn't want to play this game. She didn't like it. So, of course, I did not force her to play. It was not mandatory. But in my game, there were no choices. I think if there were more choices, more autonomy for students, I think it could have been easier for me to engage that student as well. Okay, so moving on to the conclusion, gamefulness can be included in language education through either game enhanced, that is to use authentic games, game based, that is to use the games that are intentionally designed for language learning, or game informed. We see how games are designed and we use those techniques in our language courses to gamify our language courses. Game informed language learning is also referred to as gamification. Gamification not only improves learner engagement but also learning outcomes. Gamification is usually a series of activities. You can gamify your courses using mechanics and dynamics. These are the two references that I used for designing this presentation. There's an interesting book by Jonathan Reinhardt, Gameful Second and Foreign Language Learning, Foreign Language Teaching and Learning. That's a wonderful read. And of course, Kim and colleagues have written Gamification in Learning and Education. It has examples of other subjects as well. These are some resources which you can use in order to familiarize yourself with games and gamification. Duolingo, Space Team ESL, and this is a wonderful journal, Ludic Language Pedagogy, which gives real examples by classroom practitioners. How do they use games in their language learning? Thank you so much for watching this. Bye.